Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our channel. Today we are going to read The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. Chapter number 1. One evening of last summer, before the 19th century had reached one third of its span, a young man and a woman, the latter carrying a child, were approaching the large village of Wedon Priors in Upper Wessex on foot. They were plainly but not ill-clad, though the thick hoar of dust which had accumulated on their shoes and garments from an obviously long journey lent a disadvantageous shabbiness to their appearance just now. The man of fine figure, swarthy and stern in aspect, and he showed in profile a facial angle too slightly inclined as to be almost perpendicular. He wore a short jacket of brown corduroy, newer than the remainder of his suit, which was a fustian waistcoat with white horn buttons, breeches of the same, tan leggings, and a straw hat overlaid with black glazed canvas. At his back he carried by a loop strap a rush basket from which protruded at one end the crutch of a hay knife, a wimble for hay bonds being also visible in the aperture. He Mayer's springless walk was the walk of the skilled countryman, as distinct from the desultory shamble of the general labourer, while in the turn and plant of each foot there was further a dogged and cynical indifference personal to himself, showing its presence even in the regularly interchanging fustian folds, now in the left leg, now in the right, as he paced along. What was really peculiar, however, in his couple's progress and would have attracted the attention of any casual observer otherwise disposed to overlook them, was a perfect silence they preserved. They looked side by side in such a way as to suggest a farce of the low, easy, confidential chat of people full of reciprocity. But on closer view, it could be discerned that the man was reading or pretending to read a balance sheet which he kept before his eyes with some difficulty by the hand that was passed through the basket strap. Whether this apparent cause were the real cause, or whether it were an assumed one to escape an intercourse that would have been irksome to him, nobody but himself could have said precisely. But his taciturnity was unbroken, and the woman enjoyed no society whatever from his presence. Virtually, she walked the highway alone, save for the child she bore. Sometimes the man's bent elbow almost touched her shoulder, for she kept as close to his side as was possible without actual contact. But she seemed to have no idea of taking his arm, nor he of offering it, and far from exhibiting surprise at his ignoring silence, she appeared to receive it as a natural thing. If any word at all were uttered by the little group, it was an occasional whisper of the woman or to the child. A tiny girl in short clothes and blue boots of knitted yarn, and the murmured babble of the child in reply. The chief, almost the only, attraction of the young woman's face was its mobility. When she looked down sideways to the girl, she became pretty and even handsome, particularly that in action her features caught slantwise the rays of the strongly colored sun, which made transparencies of her eyelids and nostrils and set fire on her lips. When she plodded on in the shade of the hedge, silently thinking, she had the hard, half apathetic expression of one who deems anything possible at the hands of time and chance, except perhaps fair play. The first phrase was the work of nature, the second probably of civilization. That the man and woman were husband and wife, and the parents of the girl in arms. There could be little doubt. No other than such relation would have accounted for the atmosphere of stale familiarity which the trio carried along with them like a nimbus as they moved down the road. The wife mostly kept her eyes fixed ahead, though with little interest, the scene for that matter being one that might have been matched at almost any spot in any county in England at this time of the year. A road neither straight nor crooked, neither level nor hilly, bordered by hedges, trees, and other vegetation, which had entered the black and green stage of color that the doomed leaves passed through on their way to dingy and yellow and red. The grassy margin of the bank and the nearest hedgerow boughs were powdered by the dust that had been stirred over them by hasty vehicles. The same dust as it lays on the road, deadening their footfalls like carpet, and this, with the aforesaid total absence of conversation, allowed every extraneous ex- sounds to be heard. For a long time there was none, beyond the voice of a weak bird singing a triety old evening song that might doubtless have been heard on the hill at the same hour, and with the self same trills, quavers, and brevies at any sunset of that season for centuries untold. But as they approached the village, sundry distant shouts and rattles reached their ears from some elevated spots in the direction, as yet screened from view by the foliage. When the outlying houses of Weydon Priors could just be described, the family group was met by a turnip hoe with his hoe on his shoulder and his dinner bag suspended from it. The reader promptly glanced up. "Any trade doing here?" he said phlegmatically, designating the village in his van by a wave of a broadsheet, and thinking the labourer did not understand him, he added, "Anything in the hay trouncing line?" The turnip hoer had already begun shaking his head. Why save the man? What wisdom's in him that should come to Weydon for a job of that sort this time of year? Then this there any house to let? A little small new cottage just upbuilded, or such like? Asked the other. The pessimist still maintained a negative. Pulling down is more the nature of Hayden. There were 5 houses cleared away last year, and 3 this, and the walk nowhere to go. No, not so much as the thatched hurdler that the way Owen Priors. The hairdresser, which obviously was, nodded with some superciliousness, looking towards the village. He continued, "There is something going on here, however, is there not? This fair day, though what was here now is little more than the clatter and scurry of getting away the money or children and fools, for the real business is done earlier than this. I have been working within sound out all day, but I did not go up, not I. 'Twas no business of mine." The trusser and his family proceeded on the way and soon entered the fair field, which showed standing places and pens where many hundreds of horses and sheep had been exhibited and sold in the forenoon, but were now in great part taken away at present, as their informant had observed. But little real business remained on hand, the chief being the sale by auction of a few inferior animals that could not otherwise be disposed of, and had been absolutely refused by the better class of traders who came and went early. Yet the crowd was denser now that during the morning hours the frivolous contingent of visitors, including journeymen out for a holiday, a stray soldier or two home on furlough, village shopkeepers, and the like, having latterly flocked in, person whose activities found a congenial field among the peep shows, toy stands, waxworks, inspired monsters, disinterested medical men who travel for the public good, thimble rigger, knick-knack vendors, and readers of fate. Neither of our pedestrians had much heart for these things, and these looked around for a refreshment tent among the many which dotted down the two which stood nearest to them in the orchrous haze of expiry sunlight seemed almost equally inviting. One way formed of a new milk hue canvas and bore red flags on its summit. It announced good home brewed beer, ale and cider. The other was less new. A little iron stove pipe came out of it at the back, and in front appears the placard. Good firmity soul here. The man mentally weighed the two inscriptions and inclined to the former tent. No, no, the other one, said the woman. I always like firmity, and so said Elizabeth Jane, and so will you. It is nourishing after a long hard day. I have never tasted it, said the man. However, he gave way to her representation, and they entered the furmity booth forthwith. A rather numerous company appeared within, seated at the long narrow tables that ran down the tent of each side. At the upper end stood a stove containing a charcoal fire over which hung a large three-legged crook, sufficiently polished round the rim to show that it was made of bell metal. A haggish creature of about 50 presided in a white apron, which, as it threw an air of respectability over her as far as it extended, was made so wide as to reach nearly around her waist. She slowly stirred the contents of the pot. The dull scrap of her large spoon was audible throughout the tent as she thus kept from burning the mixture of corn in the grain, flour, milk, raisins, currants, and what not that composed the antiquated slope in which she dealt. Mrs. holding the separate ingredients stood on a white cloth tables of boards and treadless close by. The young man and woman ordered a basin each of the mixture, steaming hot, and sat down to consume it as layer. This was very well so far for firmity, as the woman has said, was nourishing and as proper a food as could be obtained within the four seas. Though to those not accustomed to it, the grains of wheat swollen as large as lemon pips, which floated on its surfaces, might have a deterrent effect at first. But there was more in that tent than met the cursory glance, and the man, with the instinct of a perverse character, scented it quickly. After a mincing attack on his bowl, he watched the hag's proceedings from the corner of his eye, and saw the game she played. He winked to her and passed up his basin in reply to her nod. When she took a bottle from under the table, sleely measured out a quantity of its content and tipped the same into the man's furmity. The liquor poured it was rum. The man as sleely sent back money in payment. He found the connotations thus strongly laced, much more to his satisfaction than it has been in its natural state. His wife had observed the proceeding with much uneasiness, but he persuaded her to have hers laced also, and she agreed to a milder alliance after some misgiving. The man finished his basin and called for another, the rum being signalled for in yet stronger proportion. The effect of it was soon apparent in his manner, and his wife but too sadly perceived that in strenuously stirring off the rocks of the licensed liquid tent, she had only got into maelstrom depths here amongst the smugglers. The child began to prattle impatiently, and the wife more than once said to her husband, Michael, how about our lodging? You know we may have trouble in getting it if we don't go soon. But he turned a deaf ear to those bird-like chirpings. He talked loud to the company. The child's black eyes, after slow, round, ruminating gazes at the candles when they were lighted, fell together. Then they opened then shut again, and she slept. At the end of the first basin, the man had risen to serenity. At the second, he was jovial. At the third, argumentative. At the fourth, the qualities dignified by the shape of his face, the occasional clench of his mouth, and the fiery spark of his dark eye, begin to tell in his conduct. He was overbearing, even brilliantly quarrelsome. The conversation took a high turn, as it often does on such occasions. The ruin of good men by bad wives, and more particularly the frustration of many a promising youth, his aims and hopes, and the extinction of his energy by an early imprudent marriage, was the theme. I did for myself that way thoroughly, said the true sir, with a contemplative bitterness that was well nigh resentless. I married at 18 like the fool that I was, and this is the consequence of it. The pointed at himself and family with a wave of the hand intended to bring out the penuriousness of the exhibition. The young woman, his wife, who seemed accustomed to such remarks, acted as if she did not hear them, and continued her intermittent private words on tender trifles to the sleeping and waking child, who was just big enough to be placed for a moment on the bench beside her when she wished to ease her arms. The man continued, I haven't more than 15 siblings in the world, and yet I am a good experienced hand in my line. I had challenged England to beat me in the fodder business, and if I were a free man again, I had be worth £1,000 better I had done of it. But a fellow never knows these little things till all chance of acting upon 'em is past. The auctioneer selling the old houses in the field outside could be heard saying, now this is the best lot. Now who will take the last lot for a song? Shall I say 40 siblings? Shillings? It is a very promising brood mare, a trifle over 5 years old, and nothing the matter with the hoos at all, except that she is little hooler in the back and had her left eye knocked out by the kick of another, her own sister, coming along the road.